Well, I have to tell you, I am really excited to report to you that we have right at just under 200 people registered for Rooted. That's going to begin next Sunday, September 10th. And in fact, we've had to close registration. You've been hearing about Rooted this last month. We've had to close it. And so we're going to do a rerun of Rooted in January again for a whole new wave of folks. And we'll open up registration October 1st for that. But really excited about that. And the reason we had to close registration is we just ran out of leaders for this first wave of Rooted. And so if you haven't been able to get in it, you will be able to get in it beginning October 1st for our January round of Rooted. I'm as excited about that as I am about the new, I don't know how many of you have had it, but I got to tell you up front, the new honey pepper pimento cheese chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A. I would confess to you, I've had it 3 days in a row in the middle of the afternoon. Not exactly ideal for the waistline. You know, I joke often that my sons have 6-packs. I have 2-liters here, and it's becoming a 3-liter because of the pimento cheese chicken sandwich. But a lot of things to be excited about. And yet I want to begin also by acknowledging something very serious that happened last Monday night here at our Vista Ridge campus. A disturbed individual was in their vehicle doing donuts out in the fields behind our facility next to the soccer fields, which was populated with kids and soccer teams. And he was confronted and asked to stop because there were so many kids and parents and soccer teams around. And the situation escalated from there. He didn't want to. He left and came back with a gun and began showing it and making threats to harm himself, to do things with it. And I'm so grateful for the quick thinking of coaches and parents getting all the kids in the vehicles so quickly, as well as I'm grateful for our civil servants, the Carrollton Police Department, who showed up and were able to take control of the situation. And eventually the man surrendered himself over to them. And thankfully, no one was hurt. And I'm just full of gratitude for all the different roles people played. I'm also grateful for all the things I don't know about that God took care of at that moment. Because things like that can happen on a normal Monday night where people are rushing from school to soccer, from work to soccer, from work to the well. We had groups meeting in here, and it could have been terrible what happened, but thanks be to God, nothing happened. And yet I'm mindful that every day we live in a world where there are people who are disturbed, who are spiritually oppressed, who are mentally tormented, and that can have ramifications for everyone. None of us lives really in isolation. And yet I'm grateful for what happened last Monday night, the provision of the Lord. Amen. Now I got to tell you, later on, it did get me to thinking about an old episode from Andy Griffith, and I'm dating myself. In fact, I'm predating myself because Andy Griffith is before my time, but lives on even in syndication. How would you like to be part of the downline of the family that created that show, still getting the residuals today? But there's this epic episode in Andy Griffith where Andy, the sheriff of Mayberry, is out of town, and he has left his right-hand man, Barney Fife, in charge, who is the town deputy of Mayberry, and Barney decides he needs to deputize a new assistant, and Gomer Pyle volunteers. Gomer Pyle, the local mechanic, I believe, volunteers, and so Barney deputizes Gomer and begins to show him the ropes around Mayberry. They're walking down the street one particular day, and a bank is being robbed, and a bank has never been robbed in Mayberry before, and here's Barney, and here's Gomer, and they see the bank being robbed, and the first thing they do is hide behind a car and watch what's going on. And after watching what's going on and observing, and they're both just terrified, Gomer says to Barney, "We need to call the police." And Barney looks at him exasperated, played by Don Knotts, and says, "We are the police." I found myself thinking about that. Not just because of what happened Monday, but because of where we're about to be right now. Sometimes you can be so taken aback, so overwhelmed by something that you're observing that you can forget who you are, what you've been called to do, that you can forget what it is that you signed up for. And so we're in this series, This Is Us. By the way, it's not This Is Bus, which some of y'all still ask. This is us. Series about the church. And I want to take you back to a passage I touched on just a few weeks ago. It's the very first time that Jesus, pay attention to when he uses the word church, Jesus uses the word church. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the context in which he says it. In other words, the location, where it is he is saying it, because it's going to add some color to you for what it means to be the Big C church globally in the world, as well as the Little C church, our local church at the Branch. Picking up in Matthew 16, verses 13 through 18. Lord, give us eyes to see. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, now remember that, that's where he is. He asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? And Jesus has taken them off now, just to let you know, they're way away from Jerusalem. They're way up in the far north country of Israel, where they can't be found. He's taken them on a retreat where they can't be found. And he wants to know, who do people say the Son of Man is? He wants to have some alone time with them. And they replied, back to the verse, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say I am? This is so powerful. They can say what everybody else is saying. You know people like that. They can report on what everybody else is saying, what everybody else is doing, what everybody else is confessing. But he wants them. He said, I want to know what you think. Who do you say I am? And Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. The word for church here, when Matthew is writing his gospel, is the word ecclesia. Cool word. Told you a little bit about it last week. Let me give you, or a few weeks ago, let me give you just one more detail about it. An ecclesia in the days of Jesus was a group of Roman citizens who left Rome. And they would live in a foreign country and represent the life, values, and culture of the Roman Empire in the foreign country. And the idea was this ecclesia, this group of Roman citizens, were trying to give the natives of that country, here's an idea of what it looks like to live as a citizen of the Roman Empire. You ought to play with Rome, submit to Rome, abide by Rome, because the Roman way is the best way to live. Jesus comes along and he announces, I'm building my own ecclesia. And when you and I acknowledge and surrender our lives to Jesus as King, when we make that confession, we become part of this group of people, his ecclesia. And we're part of this group of people, this ecclesia. We represent him and what life is like with him as King of our lives in our world. This is the idea of what it means to be an ecclesia, a church, a community of people where literally our lives together and as individuals during the week, our lives give people an idea, an advertisement of what it's like under the reign of Jesus. We do not do it perfectly. We're disciples in process, as I like to say, but this is the idea. And by the way, think about that word represent and reframe it. Think of it this way, represent, R-E dash P-R-E-S-E-N-T. Sometimes you need to slow down and just think of it in terms of represent. Why? We live in a world that desperately needs a representing of Jesus. Because a lot of people have seen some very poor representations of Jesus. This is what it means to be his ecclesia. But then Jesus says this epic line, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Now, it's where Jesus is geographically when he says this that means something so interesting. The whole conversation is taking place in Caesarea Philippi. You learn that from the opening verse. Caesarea Philippi, I know, sounds like a salad at Olive Garden or something, okay? But it's an incredible city. Tara and I had the opportunity to journey up there when we toured Israel a few years back. In fact, we were hiking in this far northern range of Israel. It actually almost overlooks Syria. I could see Syria from this mountain range. In fact, we went up into these mountains around Caesarea Philippi, and I'll show you a couple pictures here. We went up here. You'll see these pictures up here in just a moment. We're kind of just a little above Caesarea Philippi in the mountains, and up here, those stones right there are from Old Testament times. That's when Jeroboam brought all the people of God into northern Israel and led them all into Baal worship. That was a Baal worship site with the original stones. The metal girding you see there is what archaeologists have done to give you an idea of the size of the altar where they were sacrificing things to Baal. But those are the original stones. Stunning stuff. 1,000 years before the time of Jesus. Tara and I are traipsing around up there. The next picture you'll see right here is, in fact, a changing room. That's a changing room for the priests that were doing the Baal worship from the stories you read about in the Old Testament. Incredible stuff. This area was marked by profound idolatry in the Old Testament. It was a bad memory for the Jewish people. Remember this. This is in the area of Caesarea Philippi. By the days of Jesus, the Roman Empire had come and had taken over this area, and it developed a city called Caesarea Philippi at the base of those mountains where I just took you. And the city was developed at the base of a cliff like that you see. This is from Caesarea Philippi. And along the base of the cliff were all these caves, which led to some very deep springs of fresh water. Let's go to one more picture here. Hopefully it'll give you an idea. That's up to a cave, and these springs of water would come up at this time. It's dry now, but these springs of water would come up through these caves, and fresh water would come out of these caves. Now, the Romans believed that these caves were entrances or gates to the underworld. They called these the gates of Hades. And what they believed is that the gods from the underworld would travel up through these caves and enter into Caesarea Philippi and all of Israel. And so they would dig up all kinds of niches around these caves and leave gifts for the gods and put representations or idols of the gods in these little niches all around the caves, as a way of honoring the gods that were coming from the underworld, as a way of honoring the gods to try and appease them. Some of these gods, like Hades, were terrible, the god of destruction. For example, if someone young died in Caesarea Philippi, it was thought that Hades had come up from the underworld on this river, traveling through this cave, and swept out the life of the young person. It was thought that Hades had power even over the other gods and goddesses to take them down. But there were other gods that came up through these caves that might help you if you knew the right buttons to push. And one of those gods was a god named Pan. Herod the Great built a massive temple to Pan there in Caesarea Philippi, right by these caves. You can still visit it today. And this particular cave where Pan hung out, where the temple is, had a powerful river that was quite deep. Pan was thought to be half man and half goat. He was associated with fertility and sexuality. So they worshiped Pan with prostitution and even some really bizarre sexual rituals involving human beings and goats. And on some occasions, they would even sacrifice animals or unwanted babies in these caves. Just throw them in the water, which is ironic because they're looking for a blessing on fertility and they're throwing babies in there as sacrifices. All these kinds of things were being done to get a blessing from the gods or to keep the gods appeased. By the way, this is where you get the word panic from today in American culture. Right here, Caesarea Philippi, the god Pan. It's anxiety and fear associated with not quite knowing what's going to happen. Pan produces panic in the sense that you don't have any guarantees or guesses when it comes to what Pan or Hades might do for that matter. Why am I telling you this? Because I want you to get a picture of Caesarea Philippi. It was an evil pagan place in the eyes of the Jews, in the eyes of the disciples who are following Jesus. It was noted for crazy worship rituals and involving all kinds of prostitution and immorality and bestiality and animal and child sacrifice. The Jews thought Caesarea Philippi was a doorway to hell. The Romans thought Caesarea Philippi was a doorway to hell for a different reason. Everybody thought Caesarea Philippi was the doorway to hell for some reason. And when Jesus brought his disciples up in that area for a retreat, it would be like me bringing you on a spiritual retreat in the middle of a county that's littered with meth labs. Or saying, hey, we're going to have a church retreat at Caesar's Palace in Vegas. Have some quiet time. Get away from all the noises and lights, Spend some time with God. Be quiet for a while. It just doesn't compute why Jesus would take these men to Caesarea Philippi and have a retreat. And it's likely they're in view of one of these major caves when Jesus is speaking. Now, hopefully you have a better idea of the background in which the conversation is taking place. Jesus takes them to hell's door, to the place where all hell is breaking loose, and he asks them a question. Who do you say I am? Peter says, you're the Messiah. You're the Son of the living God. And he says it right in the middle of the place that's associated with all of hell breaking loose. Jesus says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. For this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. Stop right there. Jesus says, God's at work in you, Simon, right in the very place where all hell is breaking loose to reveal who I am. They're looking at a cliff with caves where gods of the underworld come and go. And Jesus says, and you know what? I'm going to build my church right here. I'm going to build it right here, right in the place at Hell's Gates. I'm going to build it right here, and I'm going to build it on top of the gods that are traveling from the underworld into this world. I'm going to build it, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. It's worth noting today, you can go to Caesarea Philippi, like my wife and I did, and you won't hear anything about the god Pan or Hades. They're things of the past. And in fact, you can look at the gates of Hades today and see that they're actually caving in. They're not impressive anymore, nor is the Roman Empire for that matter. But Jesus, he's another story. So is his ecclesia. I think this story speaks into us as a church in two different ways. I think it speaks into our lives as individuals two different ways. It means that we recognize Jesus for who he is in the places where it feels like all hell is breaking loose. Peter confesses, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, right there at the gates of Hades. And I've been at the branch long enough to see my share of people, brothers and sisters here, continue to confess and follow Jesus when it seemed like their life was at the gates of Hades in some way. I've seen so many of you confess him and continue to follow him in the wake of bearing children, being betrayed by spouses, filing for bankruptcy, dealing with chronic illness and disease, fighting for sobriety. I've seen so many of you continue to confess Jesus as Lord in the face of terribly draining cancer treatments. I've seen so many of you confess Jesus as Lord in the midst of a time in which your family was being fractured. I've seen so many of you live in such a way as though you were saying, Jesus, you're the way forward in the midst of this, and what you have to say, your life, your teachings, your spirit, you're the way forward. Christ means king. That's also what Messiah means. Messiah means king, and I've seen so many of us, so many of you say with your lives, you're still the king in the midst of this, and I'm following you. Richard Foster says something so profound. He says, superficiality is the curse of our age. The desperate need today is not for a greater number of intelligent people or gifted people, but for deep people. And sometimes you don't know how deep your roots are until a hurricane comes. But people tend to pay attention to the trees that are still standing after the hurricane blows through. And Jesus actually is building his church through people who make and live the confession of him as king, especially in times when all hell is breaking loose. He builds right there. And he builds from there. I think it speaks into our life a second way, and it's this. I think it means we represent Jesus in places where all hell is breaking loose. Because there are lots of people in the places where all hell is breaking loose that think Jesus has little relevance to them, or even worse, that Jesus would have nothing to do with them. It was William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, that said some people choose to live within the chime of a church bell, but I choose to live and operate a rescue shop within a yard of hell. So what does it look like to represent Jesus in the places where all hell is breaking loose? I'll tell you what it looks like. It's some of you who've been involved in the ministry of Embrace Grace, who've been helping single young women who are pregnant to get ready to bring life into the world through addressing their practical needs, through giving them support and counsel and wisdom and helping them find Jesus in the midst of bringing life into the world. Do you realize that just here through Embrace Grace, some 24 precious children have entered into the world through the help of many of you? To a mother, yeah, praise God, to a mother that's been supported and strengthened and covered and counseled that whole way. And yet they were walking through stretches before they found Embrace Grace where all hell was breaking loose. It's some of you who've been working through Breaking the Cycle ministry to minister to women who've been the victims of abuse and toxic, controlling relationships. You know, as many as 50 women, which includes a few online, have been through the support group here and have found support and counsel. It's our students who reach out to the lonely, disenfranchised students in school. It's one of our small group leaders who's up late at night trying to help a couple through a tough time because the wife has been through yet another miscarriage. It's one of our marriage mentors who's working to help another couple whose marriage is on the rocks learn how to build their marriage again on the rock. It's those of you who've been serving in Financial Peace University groups for years, helping people to just somehow get a handle on their relationship with money and possessions under the wisdom and leading of King Jesus in order to find a peace and an order that blesses their marriage or their family or their situation. It's people like those who are part of the Branch Cares team that minister to the sick and the shut in who are dealing with chronic illness and isolation and sometimes depression. It's those who are part of Celebrate Recovery that meets Tuesday nights at 7, but the truth is it's a 7-day-a-week thing because sobriety and walking in freedom under the reign of Jesus is a 7-day-a-week thing. It's also now those of you who are part of Grief Share that's been launched and Divorce Care that's been launched. Meeting people who are in fresh expressions of hell breaking loose. It's people like you who are willing to carry on a conversation over the course of weeks or even months with a neighbor or a coworker or a workout buddy or a teammate or a friend who thinks that God will never have anything to do with them because of what they've done, and yet they're continuing to be hell-bent on their cycle of self-destruction, and yet you're still being present, sowing those seeds. You keep showing up to point them to God's love and desire to redeem all things through Jesus Christ. These are just a few of the ways You might be representing Jesus in the places where all of hell is breaking loose. And you may think, Chris, I'm not in any of those categories. I'm just trying to stay afloat right now and raise my kid or my grandkid. And I would tell you, our kids and our grandkids have so much going on in their minds and in their lives. Hell's breaking loose there too. And one day there may be no greater compliment you ever receive than a child looking at you in the eye, or a grandchild, and saying, thank you for showing me and being present in my life even when I didn't understand it or appreciate it. And I don't know what it looks like in particularity for you to be an expression, a representation of Jesus in a place where all hell is breaking loose. And I know that sometimes it can be overwhelming, and you and I are like Gomer Pyle hiding behind a car, overwhelmed, saying, we need to call somebody. And the whole time, you're the one that's wearing the uniform, bud. You're the one that's been authorized by the king. Several years ago, somebody had a flat, their car, one Sunday after church out at the Farmers Branch campus. They come in. Tim Ketchersit, our campus pastor at the time down there, is in there, and most everybody's left. They come in, and it's a woman who has a flat, and another dude comes in and tells Tim, hey, do we have somebody that, has like a ministry of helping people with their cars, change tires and stuff? Tim just looks at him the way that only Tim can, if you know Tim. Tim just kind of looks at him. Yeah, you're the ministry. Get out there. Good answer. I mean, sometimes we see stuff going on. We need to call somebody. We need to get somebody. And sometimes you do. And then sometimes it's you being called to step up and be present in the place where all hell is breaking loose. Trusting in the leadership of Jesus and the filling of his Spirit. And the best news of all, you're never meant to do it alone for very long. He's talking to the group of them. And when he sends them out, he always sends them out at least 2 by 2. I want to close by asking you to bow your head for a moment with me. And I want you just to take a moment. I want you to pray through 3 moves with me right now. The first is this. I just want to say, if you're in the midst of a time where it feels like all of hell is breaking loose, you feel like you personally are at the gates of the underworld, and you feel like you haven't encountered Jesus in the midst of it, I want you right now, go ahead and ask for the Spirit to reveal Jesus to you and to give you eyes to see him in that right now. He's there somewhere at the gates. I want you to take a moment now and ponder that situation. I believe right now the Lord is giving revelation to some about where Jesus might be in that circumstance. I want you to take a moment and ponder this situation. And then I just want you to say, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, over it. Make the confession right there in that situation that you're in. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You're just meditating on it. Just say it again. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. It's okay to say it over and over for all the other things you say over and over to yourself that are not true. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. I want you to think about something right now going on around you, that it just seems like all of hell is breaking loose. You're not the one at the gates, but you see other people at the gates. What would it look like for you to be an expression of Jesus to them? It may be something overwhelming to you. Take a moment and just ask the Lord, Lord, how might I be Jesus to them this week? Lord, we ask your mercy on those of us who feel like it's all breaking loose in our lives. We long to see you, Jesus, in the midst of it. We confess you in the midst of it. And will you build your church from this place where we are right now? Will you extend your kingdom through us, even in this moment, right now? Right at the intersection of the underworld and this world, will your kingdom break out? And for our loved ones and our friends, family members, people who we've been praying for to encounter you, to find you, people who themselves are at the gates, will you, by your good Spirit, lead us into what it means for us to be a particular expression of Jesus to them, conducive to exactly what they need this week, Lord. And we give you thanks that the gates of destruction will not prevail against your ecclesia, your people. May light and life continue to flood through us. Now, just as a continuation of this prayer time, I want to invite you to be standing right now. And I just want to ask those who are serving in prayer to be joining me down front right now. And it's just a continuation of this prayer time. We are going to confess King Jesus in worship, but it could be that you're thinking, you know what, I would like to pray with somebody or have somebody pray for me. So I just want to ask right now, just for people to be joining me down front. And if you came today and you're thinking, you know what, I could use some prayer. I got all hell breaking loose in my life. I don't even know where to begin. We don't announce your name or situation publicly. It's totally between you and the Lord and whoever it is you choose to pray with. But I would invite you to come down. Even during this time while I'm speaking, we are ready to receive you, to pray with you, to pray for you. Or it could be, you might be thinking, you know what? I want to ask for a special anointing this week because I know who it is I need to minister to. I know who it is that I long to represent Jesus to. And I just want to ask God to fill me with his love, his mercy, his spirit, his wisdom. We'd be honored to pray for you as well. Or maybe you don't know where to begin with Jesus again. You can begin this way by talking to one of us, allowing us to pray with you, to pray for you, whatever your needs. We're going to be down here. Lord, will you water what's been sown today? Will you water what's been sown? And we give you thanks that you are Jesus who continues to keep manifesting yourself in the darkest places, not the least of which was a cross at Golgotha. To stem the tide of hell and to give us victory. We praise you in Jesus' name. Let's worship the Lord. If we can pray for you, won't you come?